Question came in from somebody saying, how do I know what I know is my own opinion? And the short answer to that, the very short answer to that is, you don't. And furthermore, 95% of what you think is not from first-hand experience. That means it's just someone else saying this, and then it's popped into your head, and then you think that for the rest of your life. This scares me. It scares me profoundly, because even though a lot of my job is just looking up what experts say and then putting on a stupid wig so people pay attention. I don't know why that works, it just does. But I am relying on secondhand experience, right? So, for instance, if I'm talking about whether the Liberal Party or the Labor Party is better at the economy, I don't know. No one actually knows for a fact, obviously, right? No one can, but you would imagine that experts in economics who spend their entire life studying that one field would have a more informed opinion than you would, right? So you rely on them. So the best thing you do to counteract to this idea, I guess in general, is that you should just be looking to experts in fields. And does that mean that they're always right? Absolutely, it doesn't mean that they're always right. For instance, most experts in economics for years thought that neoliberalism's the way to go, and that caused the global financial crisis. It's probably going to cause another global financial crisis because they haven't fucking stopped doing it. And they never will, because essentially it's just this Trojan horse of corporate interests just pushing into universities and training people to think that if you make corporations richer, people get richer in general, which is just demonstrably false now. But nighty-night, kids. Think about that while you're sleeping. The world is going to collapse economically, and then out of resources, and then ecologically. But in the short term, so what you know for an experience isn't from that. And then furthermore, this is the other thing. Say that you burn your hand as a kid and you learnt that experience before somebody taught you that fire is going to burn your hand. For the rest of your life, you may have an irrational fear of kitchen benches. Because it kind of just goes into your nervous system when something like that happens. So even on that level, even when it is first-hand experience, you will make new connections in your environment that are probably false. Maybe not probably, but they could be false. So the thing is, what do you actually know for a fact? I was alluding to this in the previous video, and I don't want to go down that path again, man. It was too much for me. But the thing is that if you sit there and you write, what do I know for sure, over and over, every night, eventually what starts happening is you realize that you don't actually know anything for sure. For instance, do you know for a fact that your mum's your mum? Unless you have had a DNA test, probably not. So you have to include that. You have to include that. Maybe she's not. This happens a lot of the time. People just go like, but how could I possibly be adopted? I mean, I'm a South Korean and I was born in America to white parents in Idaho. I don't get it. But this happens. That's just one tiny example. Do you know how this was made? The clothes are on you? Maybe. Maybe you know a small portion of it, but I highly doubt you know what field it was grown in. I highly doubt you know if it was like interwoven with synthetics or it was done with some crazy different chemical. Is it actually all natural? Like, do you know how much do you actually know? This is the whole thing. And the scariest thing is that society just keeps getting more and more complex and experts become more and more isolated and more specialized. They become more isolated as a result of becoming more specialized. So, in general, society has no idea how society functions. There'd be people like politicians who would have a better idea than most people, but they don't know anything close to everything. So, there's this increasing volume and expansion of knowledge. Human brains aren't getting that much better, and so as a result of that, you kind of just have to look to society for a lot of your prompts. This is why, for instance, you know, a lot of people think that you need to have toothpaste. But I was just reading recently, and look, there's going to start this huge cascade of arguments in the comments, but I was learning that apparently you don't need toothpaste at all, that you just need to brush your teeth. That toothpaste was just a marketing invention, that it's completely made up. Anyway, look, I'm not saying that that's the truth. I'm not even going to go down. I'm not going to defend toothpaste to the death, and I still use it. I like the minty flavor, which is why it's there, actually, by the way, because people just felt like, my teeth don't feel clean. That's why when you get rid of it, a lot of it is just like, but it doesn't have that tingliness. Also because I'm just extremely obsessed with my aging face, that I have to always make sure that I've got white teeth. I can't wait to be that 70-year-old man that's extremely tanned with those inbuilt pupils going like, I'm Jack LaLanne. There's all of these things. So, for instance, you can't. You cannot tell what you know for a fact. You can look into it. You can have a more curious mind than most people do, which is what a lot of people... The main thing that you want to be developing over your entire period of life, and again, one of the very few things that I learned that was valuable in university, again, was from South Korea, and it was just an introduction to critical thinking. And it was pretty much just that over and over. How do you know what you know? Constantly question assumptions. When people just say something, say, how do you know that? And most of the time, within like 3 questions, usually within 1 question, it's just, my uni teacher. Which, that's what I'm saying with it. But it's that very faculty, and it's just been proven. People with good critical thinking faculties are much more likely to succeed in life. They're often much more likely to live longer. They're much more likely to earn more. They're much less likely to go bankrupt or to be suckered by these things that, just like a 24 months interest free. That is usually for people that just don't question things at all. So the very fact that you're questioning that's a step forward. Good for you. But the overall expanding idea that you don't know anything, I want to go into this because I like this just in the comments for my own personal benefit, which is that, do you have an example of a book that made you woke as fuck? Because, sorry to answer your question with just, well, you don't, and it's much worse than what you thought. Anyway, tune in next week, but do you have something that just, you read it and it kind of kept you up at night and it keeps you scared for years later? Because this is the thing. When you watch a scary film, if you're like me, you'll be scared for the next 3 months. But it goes away after a while. Actually, every now and then I just go, oh God, the ring! I can't sleep! But in general, those feelings go away. What doesn't go away is something like when I read Manufacturing Consent. That's my example that I'm giving out to you people who go, you don't tell me the book that you read. You lazy little shits. Furthermore, I'm not going to be doing that because I've got a stand-up show that I want you to buy and I've put the list at the end of that. Ka-ching! But I'll give you a freebie because I just think that this is an extremely important book for everybody to read, which is Manufacturing Consent. And that plays into that idea, which is just that if you get enough experts saying something, and how do you get enough experts by saying something? Money. How do you get money? Usually through human misery, usually through pokies, usually through alcohol, usually through, God, here we go again, uranium, usually what you get through coal. All of these industries have a lot of money. Pharmaceuticals, all of them, a lot of money, so they have a lot of experts, and, put aside the fact that you have a bunch of lobbyists in parliament across the planet just stopping legislation from going forward in these areas, and banking's another example. Just put aside that, they have the money to brainwash the general population. That is what the propaganda model is based off of. So, in a dictatorship, just very quickly, in a dictatorship you will have just a bunch of statues of like, look at this glorious man, and his penis is so big. Look at that nice crumb, it's as large as Rocco's. It's that. But then when you go into, and everybody kind of just understands this as propaganda, then you go into a Western society. That's not how the propaganda model works. The way the propaganda model works in this society is that people own the means of information. And somebody like Rupert Murdoch, for instance, and then he decides what the agenda is going to be in news. So in the last election for Labor, for example, they made the entire thing about Labor's going to tax pensioners, even though they were getting rid of franking credits, which wasn't a tax. In fact, it was the exact opposite of that. It was people taking advantage of the tax loophole that don't pay any money in tax and then getting a refund from the taxpayer. So it was just a dole for rich people that is continuing today. Well done, Australia. Good choice. Now, it's a very complicated idea to understand. So, how much easier is it to just write pensioners tax? Just that's the headline. 80% of people click off after that. After that, even in the 20% of people that are left, that even if it's like a somewhat well-constructed journalistic, report, which is again part of the propaganda model, it's just been institutionalized in journalism to make journalists think this way. This started out in 1919 and it's just continued to this day. The way that they are taught journalism in university, which is just being like, be critical instead of be inquisitive. The whole point of that is because it protects the status quo of power. Because if you just sit there and you say, we need to change franking credits, the immediate inclination of journalists is go, what? Why do we need to do that? That's stupid. And if you think about it, the fact that the Liberal Party has no agenda whatsoever when they're a third-term government, they don't have an agenda. Think about this. In the second sitting of the Senate of the new term, they came in and they left early. They left at like 11 a.m. because they'd run out of things to discuss. That is not normal for a newly elected government. That is, I don't think it's ever happened in parliamentary history that they've just gone, yeah, we're out of ideas. Hacky sack? That's what happened. Sorry, anyway. I don't know what that was, the link to this was. Oh, yeah, that's right. So, the point is, the very powerful, very specialised interests indoctrinate the people who you are entrusting to tell you about how the world works, and those people have been indoctrinated to tell you how the world works in a way that benefits the elites. That's how the propaganda model has worked. And so when it comes to agenda setting, they'll just go, talk about the pensioners tax and the entire election. Put aside the fact that you've got an extinction crisis happening at the moment, that we have no climate policy, that our schools and hospitals are running into the ground from the huge cuts that the Liberals have put into that, and then continue to fund private schools and private hospitals to an obscene level. None of that is discussed. All that's discussed is the pensioners tax. So people make their mind up on that one issue. That is how the propaganda model works. So when people say, ABC is left-wing, which again, these left and right-wing ideas, they are part of the propaganda model as well. If you read into it enough, because I've read a lot of books about this now, but you will see that ideas like communist, capitalist, left and right, maybe they exist in an academic sense, but to the general public, these words have been heavily propagandized. They have been put with a bunch of emotional intensity, and so there's countless examples of the CIA winning elections across the globe by just saying, that party's communist. What, because they want penalty rates? Yup, communist. That's how it works. So, that was the whole thing about the propaganda model. And then you realize after a while that, holy shit, just like when you go to Turkmenistan and there'll just be pictures of Gurban Guli everywhere with a sword going, ah! You'll come to Australia, and there will be billboards worshipping the real power that is of this nation, which is Coca-Cola, BP, all of that stuff. That you replace, because the power in one of these third world countries is the dictator. So his face is plastered everywhere, but the power in Western democracies is in corporate interest, and it is evident with how many advertisements there is everywhere, constantly inundating your subconscious that like, BP's good, it's cheap, there's no downsides to gas, all that stuff, right? Anyway, so it made me hyper aware of that idea and so much more, and that's what my new stand-up show is about. But what I want from you is books that made you woke as fuck. Because I like that idea. It does. I want those books that once you see the world that way, you can't unsee it. Whatever that 80s movie is that everyone goes, that movie was really deep, and then you watch it and you go, the guy with a mullet shooting aliens for fucking 2 hours? Suppose it is. Really makes you think. Why were mullets cool? Anyway, that's what I want from you. Sorry I couldn't fully answer your question, but